200 painted faces caught the morning light, perfectly still and silent as the grave. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. They simply watched Jedediah Stone through the grime on his cabin window as he gripped his coffee cup with hands that trembled like a colt on its first day. Yesterday he had been a ghost, a virgin rancher who'd never even kissed a woman, let alone understood the customs of the Lakota who roamed these endless plains. Today he was the center of a storm he couldn't comprehend, something that had begun with nothing more than his father's jacket and a woman's grateful smile. The storm had arrived without warning the previous evening, turning the sky black as ink and sending sheets of rain across his isolated homestead. Jed had been checking on his horses when he spotted her, a figure stumbling through the downpour, her long dark hair plastered to her shoulders, her buckskin dress soaked through. Each step she took was deliberate but exhausted, as if she were fighting against more than just the wind. He thought nothing of it then, just acted on instinct. "Ma'am, you need shelter," he'd called out, his voice swallowed by the thunder. She turned, and even through the rain, he could see her dark eyes were filled with something that looked like fear. Not fear of him, but fear of something else entirely, something that made her glance repeatedly over her shoulder toward the tree line. "I cannot stay," she said, her voice barely audible above the storm, her accent soft but unfamiliar. "My people will worry." Jed's heart, which had been a drumbeat against his ribs, stuttered. A bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating her shivering form. And in that fleeting, stark light, he saw it. A small, intricately carved necklace of polished river stones, at its center a single, glowing emerald that seemed to hold its own light against the storm. It was a perfect, crystalline green, and it was identical to the small, smooth stone set into a single brass button on the cuff of his father's old wool jacket, the very jacket he wore, and the one his father had worn before he died. It was a worthless little thing, an oddity his father had picked up from a traveling salesman years ago, but Jed had always cherished it. Without hesitation, he pulled off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The moment the wool settled around her, her eyes widened. She looked down at the worn leather and faded fabric as if it were a king's ransom, then back up at his face with an intensity that made his heart race in ways he didn't understand. "You would give this to me," she whispered, her hand moving, not to the warmth of the wool, but to the small, glowing button at his cuff. "Just until the storm passes," he replied, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "You're freezing." She pulled the jacket tighter, and for a moment they stood there in the rain, two strangers sharing something that felt larger than the simple exchange it appeared to be. "My name is Lana Thunderfoot," she said, her voice softer than the rain itself. "I will remember this kindness, Jedediah Stone." She disappeared into the darkness before he could offer her his cabin, leaving him standing alone in the storm, 1,000 unanswered questions swirling in his head. Now, as he stared at the silent army outside his fence, one thought echoed through his mind. What exactly had he done? The sun climbed higher, but the warriors remained motionless. Jed had been watching them for 3 hours now, his breakfast growing cold on the table, his mind racing through every possible explanation for their presence. They weren't threatening him directly, but their sheer number made his blood run cold. 300 men could overrun his small homestead in minutes if they chose to. He tried to go about his morning routine, but every movement felt watched, examined, judged. The warriors' painted faces tracked his every step, their expressions unreadable. Some carried bows, others held long spears, but none had drawn their weapons. They simply stood there like living statues, a human wall that stretched along the entire length of his property line. That's when Jed realized this wasn't some hunting party that had stumbled upon his land. This was organized, planned, purposeful. The memory of Lana Thunderfoot's grateful smile haunted him, the way she had looked at his jacket, as if it meant something far beyond its practical warmth. The careful way she had spoken his name, the intensity in her dark eyes when she promised to remember his kindness. His father had warned him about the complexities of dealing with the native tribes, but those warnings had always seemed distant and theoretical. Now facing hundreds of armed warriors, Jed wished he had paid closer attention to those lessons. Around noon, a movement caught his eye. One warrior, taller than the others and wearing an elaborate feathered headdress, dismounted from his horse and began walking toward the cabin. Unlike the others, this man's face wasn't painted for war. His expression was serious, but not hostile, and he moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. Jed's hand instinctively moved to the rifle hanging above his fireplace, then stopped. 300 warriors against one inexperienced rancher. The weapon would be useless. The leader stopped exactly 10 paces from Jed's front porch and spoke in clear, unaccented English. "Jedediah Stone." It wasn't a question. The man knew his name. "Yes, sir," Jed replied, stepping onto his porch despite his trembling knees. "I am Chief Black Elk of the Lakota. We have come about the woman." Jed's heart hammered against his ribs. The woman. Black Elk's eyes narrowed slightly. "The woman you sheltered in the storm. The woman who now wears your jacket." The simple words hit Jed like physical blows. "She was cold," Jed said weakly. "I was just being neighborly." Something flickered across the chief's weathered features, an expression Jed couldn't decipher. When Black Elk spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. "Young rancher, do you know who she is?" The question hung in the air. Jed stared at Black Elk's face, searching for clues he couldn't interpret. "She said her name was Lana Thunderfoot. That's all I know." Black Elk's expression darkened. "That is not all you need to know." The chief turned and gestured toward the assembled warriors. "Each of these men would die for her without hesitation. They have ridden for 2 days straight because word reached us that she had been seen with a white rancher wearing his jacket." Jed felt the blood drain from his face. "I don't understand. It was just a jacket." "Just a jacket," Black Elk repeated, and something in his tone made Jed's skin crawl. "Tell me, young rancher, what did she do when you offered it to her?" The memory came flooding back with uncomfortable clarity. The way Lana had stared at the jacket as if it were precious. The way she had asked if he would truly give it to her. The intensity in her eyes when she pulled it around her shoulders. "She seemed surprised," Jed admitted, "like maybe she wasn't used to kindness from strangers. She was looking at the button on my cuff, too. The green one. It was odd." Black Elk nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "She is my daughter," he said. "And the stone on her necklace is a twin to the stone on your jacket." The words hit Jed like a physical blow. The chief's daughter. "Sir, I meant no disrespect," Jed stammered. "I was just trying to help. I didn't know who she was." "That much is clear," Black Elk replied. "If you had known, you would never have dared approach her." "What happens now?" Jed asked, his voice barely a whisper. Black Elk studied him for a long moment. "That depends on many things. Why was she alone in the storm? Why did she accept your jacket? And most importantly," the chief's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "why did she not come home last night?" Jed felt the blood turn to ice. "What do you mean she didn't come home?" "She left our camp 2 days ago to gather herbs for her grandmother's medicine. She should have returned before the storm. When our scouts found her horse this morning, still wearing your jacket, she was nowhere to be found." Jed's legs nearly gave out. "You think something happened to her?" "I think," Black Elk said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "that the last person to see my daughter alive was you." The accusation hung between them like a blade. Jed could feel the eyes of 300 warriors boring into him. Their earlier stillness now felt less like patience and more like the calm before violence erupts. "She left on her own," Jed protested. "I offered her my cabin, but she said her people would worry." Black Elk's eyes held a strange, almost hopeful glint. "There is one way to prove your innocence, young rancher. You will help us find her." The statement was so unexpected that Jed blinked in confusion. "Help you find her? But I don't know anything about tracking or... You know where you last saw her. You know which direction she went. Most importantly," Black Elk's eyes hardened, "you know why she was running." "Running!" Jed's voice was a dry croak. "My daughter is the finest rider in our tribe. For her to be caught in that storm on foot means something drove her from her horse." A chill ran down Jed's spine as he remembered Lana's behavior during the storm, the way she had kept glancing over her shoulder toward the tree line. "She seemed scared," Jed admitted. "She kept looking behind her toward the woods." Exactly. Someone was following her, someone who means her harm, and now she has disappeared somewhere in those 12 miles of wilderness between your ranch and our camp. But why do you need me? Jed asked. You have 300 men who know this land better than I ever will. Because, Black Elk said, whoever took my daughter knows we would search. They will avoid the obvious paths, but they will not expect a white rancher to be hunting with us. Your presence changes their calculations. Jed felt the weight of 300 stares pressing down on him. The logic was sound, but it also meant riding into unknown danger with men who still might decide he was responsible for their chief's daughter disappearing. And if we don't find her? Jed asked. Black Elk's expression grew stone cold. Then you will discover why my people have survived on these plains for 1,000 years, while others have not. The threat was clear. Who would want to hurt her? Jed pressed. For the first time, Black Elk hesitated. There are men who believe taking a chief's daughter would give them power over our tribe. The chief's jaw tightened. Men from our own band who hunger for leadership they have not earned. And 2 days ago, before she left camp, 3 young warriors asked to court my daughter. I denied them all. Jed's blood turned to ice water. Which 3 men? He asked. That is why we need you, White Rancher. I cannot accuse my own warriors without proof. But if one of them has taken Lana, they will not expect me to ride with a stranger. Your presence will make them careless. What if you're wrong? Jed asked. What if it wasn't someone from your tribe? Black Elk pointed toward the distant mountains. 2 days ago, Army scouts were seen near our territory. White soldiers looking for something they claimed to have lost. They asked many questions about young Native women. Jed's blood ran cold. He remembered a man he'd met a few weeks back, a bounty hunter with a cruel smile, who'd boasted about a large sum of gold offered for a stolen emerald. I think, Black Elk said, his voice quiet, that someone wanted us to believe the army took her. But my daughter is too smart and too fast to be caught by clumsy horse soldiers. She would only be taken by someone she trusted. How can I help track someone through country I don't know? Jed asked. You cannot, but you can watch faces while I track. You can see which of my men seem nervous when we search certain areas. You can notice things an outsider would notice that I, as their chief, might miss. It was a dangerous game Black Elk was proposing. Jed would be riding into hostile territory with men who might be enemies, looking for clues to identify traitors among warriors who could kill him before he could even draw breath to scream. If we find who took her, Jed asked, what happens then? Black Elk's smile was sharp as a blade. Justice. The single word carried more menace than any threat Jed had ever heard. Jed found himself riding alongside Chief Black Elk at the head of a column of 50 warriors. The trail started exactly where Jed remembered seeing Lana disappear into the storm. Black Elk dismounted and studied the ground with the intensity of a man reading a book. She went this way, he announced, pointing toward a rocky outcropping. But she was not alone. Her footprints are deep on the left side, shallow on the right. She was favoring her left leg. And here, Black Elk pointed to a depression in the soft earth. Someone else's boots, larger, walking behind her. The image that formed in Jed's mind made his stomach clench. Lana, hurt and limping, being followed by someone who meant her harm. As they rode, Jedediah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not just by the land, but by the men beside him. He saw it in the sideways glances, the hurried whispers that died the moment he turned his head. The air was thick with mistrust, blood, not enough to kill, but enough to weaken. The trail splits here. Chief, we should split our forces, cover all 3 trails. The young warrior's suggestion, meant to sound helpful, felt to Jed like an invitation to chaos. He watched as the chief's eyes narrowed. No, whoever took my daughter wants us scattered, confused. We follow the river. That path shows the most weight. The tension snapped. Faces that had been unreadable now showed clear frustration. Jed saw a quick, furious exchange of glances between Coyote and a handful of others. The silence of the plains was now the silence of a held breath. The river, when they reached it, was running high from the previous night's storm. The banks were muddy and torn up, making tracking difficult. She crossed here, Black Elk finally announced, but not willingly. The spacing of her steps. Someone was forcing her to move faster than her injury allowed. The chief's voice carried a rage that made the air feel dangerous. And there are horse tracks on the other side. Fresh ones. Chief, Coyote called out from upstream. I found something. Jed's heart sank as he saw it. His jacket. The wool coat he had given Lana, tied deliberately to a low-hanging branch near the water's edge. She left it as a sign, Black Elk said quietly. But as they got closer, Jed noticed a piece of bark tucked into a pocket. Scratched into its surface were symbols Jed couldn't read. Black Elk's face had gone pale beneath his weathered skin. It says, the chief whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and fury. The daughter pays for the father's crimes. Sunset tomorrow, or she dies. The message changed everything. This wasn't about rejected suitors or ambitious warriors. This was about revenge against Black Elk himself, with Lana as the weapon. What crimes? Jed asked. A dispute last winter, Black Elk said. A warrior from another band named Kestrel. He claimed I had stolen horses. When he challenged me to combat, I defeated him, but I spared his life. He swore he would have his revenge. And he has help, Jed said, a terrible possibility occurring to him. Someone told him when your daughter would be traveling alone. Black Elk looked around at his warriors. Because yesterday, Jed continued, I met a bounty hunter looking for a stolen gem. A green gem. The truth of it hit them both simultaneously. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a coup, designed to topple Black Elk from power and unite two tribes under Kestrel's leadership. The bounty hunter was the secondary threat, the man who would take the gem and spark a war with the white man if the main plan failed. Jed's warning about the ambush proved prophetic within the hour. As they followed the trail deeper into a narrow canyon, arrows suddenly whistled from the rocks above. Black Elk's warriors scattered for cover, but Jed spotted something that made his blood freeze. Coyote wasn't taking cover. Instead, the young warrior was signaling to the attackers. The betrayal Black Elk had suspected was happening right in front of them. Black Elk! Jed shouted over the chaos. Coyote is with them! The chief's eyes followed Jed's pointing finger, and his face hardened into a mask of controlled fury. In one fluid motion, Black Elk drew his bow and put an arrow through Coyote's shoulder, dropping the traitor to the canyon floor. The ambush collapsed into chaos as Black Elk's loyal warriors realized one of their own had led them into a trap. But the distraction gave Jed a chance to spot something the others had missed. High up on the canyon wall, he could see a flash of buckskin. She's up there, Jed called to Black Elk, pointing. On the north wall. To expose, Black Elk replied. They will kill her before we can reach her. But Jed was already moving. While the warriors engaged the ambushers, he slipped away from the main group and began climbing the steep rock face. His soft ranch life hadn't prepared him for this kind of exertion, but desperation gave him strength. The climb took agonizing minutes while the battle raged below. When he finally reached the ledge where he had spotted Lana, he found her bound and gagged, but alive. Her eyes widened when she saw him, then filled with relief. It's going to be all right, he whispered as he cut through her bonds with his knife. Your father is here. Jedediah, she gasped as soon as he removed the gag. It was Coyote. He told Kestrel where to find me. I know my father figured it out. But even as he helped her to her feet, Jed could see they weren't safe yet. The ledge was a dead end with sheer drops on three sides. That was when Lana surprised him. Instead of being the helpless captive he expected, she proved to be as resourceful as her father had claimed. She knew a different route down, a hidden path that would bring them out behind Kestrel's position. Follow me, she said, moving with a confident stride, and stay low. The descent was even more dangerous than the climb up, but Lana moved like someone who had spent her entire life navigating difficult terrain. When they finally reached the canyon floor, they were positioned perfectly to see Kestrel directing his warriors from a protected position behind a large boulder. Can you use that rifle? Lana asked, pointing to the weapon still strapped across Jed's back. Not well, he admitted. Then give it to me. What happened next would stay with Jed for the rest of his life. Lana took his rifle, settled into a shooting position with practiced ease, and with a single, brutal efficiency, put a bullet through Kestrel's thigh, dropping him instantly. The battle below collapsed. Without their leader, Kestrel's men were routed. Black Elk's warriors quickly rounded them up. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the sound of moaning and the quiet whispers of the tribe. Jed stood there, a rancher who had never fired a shot in anger, watching a woman he had met less than a day ago handle a rifle with a skill he could only dream of. Black Elk appeared, his face streaked with dust and blood, a mix of relief and pride in his eyes. He didn't say a word, just embraced his daughter. It was an unspoken moment of 1,000 years of history and love. After a long moment, Lana stepped back and looked at Jed. "He saved me, Father. He found me." Black Elk turned to Jed, and for the first time, the chief's face was soft. "You were right," he said. "The kindness of strangers is sometimes more powerful than the anger of 1,000 men." Jed's eyes fell to the button on his cuff, its small green stone catching the last rays of the setting sun, a twin to the one on Lana's necklace. He had given a stranger a jacket, and that small act had stopped a war. "The bounty hunter," Jed said, "the one who works for Kestrel. The army might still be coming." Black Elk nodded, his eyes hardening again. "We will find him. He will not bring chaos to our land. But for now, the danger is gone." Jed looked at Lana. She was not the frightened woman he had found in the storm. She was a warrior, a chief's daughter, and a survivor. "Your father, he told me you ran from something." Lana's gaze was direct. "I was not running from danger, Jedediah. I was running to a sign, the gem on my necklace. It is a symbol of a long-lost pact between our people and a family of healers, a family that wore a twin stone. I was told to give the stone to the one who helped me in my greatest need. I ran to find a path, a sign that would lead my people to the right one." The truth washed over Jed like a gentle rain. His simple act of compassion hadn't just saved a life. It was a test, a part of a long-standing prophecy. "I guess I passed," Jed said, a hint of a smile in his voice. Lana's smile, the one that had reached into parts of his soul he didn't know existed, returned. "Yes, Jedediah Stone, you passed." Jed stood on the porch of his cabin a week later, the canyon battle a distant memory. He wasn't the ghost he had been. He was a man who had faced death and found courage. He had learned that kindness could be a weapon, and that some choices, no matter how small, could change the course of an entire world. He reached for his coffee cup, his hand steady this time, and as he looked out at the endless plains, he knew that the silence was not the same. It was no longer the silence of emptiness, but the deep, contented quiet of a man who had found his place in a dangerous world. In the heart of the Wild West, a jacket, a kindness, and a green stone had changed everything.